Hello, this is Stacy with 2 Weeks in a Hammock on our walkthrough tour of the North Manitou Island Cemetery. North Manitou Island is in the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, and the island is 7 miles by 4.5 miles, 15,000 acres of wilderness backpacking. So visitors to this cemetery are backcountry campers, and it's about 3.5 miles south of the dock. The first thing we encounter is a sign that's a roster of those who are buried here. According to this sign, there are 22 people here, but other records show there's as many as 45. The perimeter of the cemetery is 165 foot square, and in the cemetery, the oldest marked grave is 1885, and according to some records I've seen, the oldest unmarked grave is 1861. Some people who are listed on their death certificates as being buried in North Manitou Island may or may not be in the cemetery. They might be at old homesteads. As we walk through the cemetery, first we're going to walk past this enclosure for the Anderson family. We'll come back to that at the end. And as we walk along here with the knee-high ferns, we're following a social trail that has naturally formed through here as visitors come and wind their way through the cemetery. The first monument we come up to is Ken Rusko and Rita Hadra Rusko. This monument is not where they're actually buried. They're actually buried in Muskegon. Rita wrote the book, North Manitou Island from Sunrise to Sunset. Next to it over here is a monument I just passed for Catherine Fisk Litwack. The next graves we see as we walk along here are Nahilda Carlson, who died in 1905 at age 19 of a diphtheria outbreak. Right behind her stone is Elizabeth Carlson's stone, and that is broken lying on the ground, although the grave may be elsewhere here in the cemetery. There's also an unmarked grave for Luella Prowse, who died as a baby. In this enclosure are the graves for May Fisher, who was 7, Nellie Fisher, who was 3, and Clara Swenson, who was 12. All three of them died in the diphtheria outbreak of 1905. As we walk up the path, we come across another set of graves. These 3 graves, the first one is an old stone that is so weathered it's unreadable. And then there is a stone for Otto Marvin Kolensky, who was a World War II Navy veteran who died in 2005, the most recent grave in the cemetery. And then Donald Kolensky, who died in 1914 as a 3-month-old child. Here we have the grave for Anna Webb, who died in 1916 at age 35 of childbirth. Next grave is John Phelan, who died in 1939 at age 80, and his brother Nicholas Phelan, who died in 1938 at age 85. They were builders on the island, built many of the houses on Cottage Row. As we look around at this beautiful landscape, you can see that the ground is hilly and is covered with these ferns with some beautiful trees. In this area, there's also some other graves for Carl Anderson and Walter Anderson that are now unmarked. They used to have a fence around them. And next set of graves is the Patchow family. The first one is John Patchow, who died in 1922 at age 66. And then the grave in the center is the oldest marked grave, and that is for Anna Patchow, 1885. She was 2 or 3 years old. And then Henry Anderson Patchow, who died in 1896 at age 39. So as we follow this trail through the cemetery, we're going to walk toward the back. And this, by the back fence here, which is on the north side, is a grave for Josephine Ross Alfred Hollister. She died in 1994 at age 80, and her family was part of the settlers for Cottage Row, and her family still owns a cottage. The crosses that you see were made locally, and they are made of like a cement mixture that have the brass plaques on them. At the end of this video, I'll show a series of photos of each one of the monuments so you can see them up close. We're kind of walking downhill a little bit right now. This whole area is very hilly. As I mentioned, there are a couple dozen other graves here that are not marked. And when you walk around, you can imagine that this uneven surface does have additional graves. We're going to go through one last area here, and that is the Anderson family plot, which has this fence around it. John Olaf Cool-John Anderson was from Norway, and he died here in 1935 at age 76. He owned the Anderson house near the Bernique house, which is seen on maps. And he is buried here as a double stone, also for his daughter Margaret, who died in 1927 at age 12. There are other Andersons listed on other rosters for this cemetery, so it's likely there could be other people buried in this larger plot. This cemetery is a very beautiful and peaceful place. It has a different look and a different feel from any other cemetery I've visited. It is truly a beautiful spot for reflection and to consider the island residents who came here and settled this area. Thank you very much for joining me on this quick walkthrough tour of the North Manitou Island Cemetery.